and it will be archived online as well. A few housekeeping notes before I introduce our presenter. Our program is going to run from 9 to 11, and we would ask that you put your microphone on mute when you're not speaking in order to mitigate background noise. You're welcome to ask questions during the session, and because there are many of us on many pages of pictures, we'd ask that you use the hand raising function that's available to you through the reactions button at the bottom of your screen. You're also welcome to post questions or comments through the chat feature. I will be keeping an eye on that, and I will pitch those comments and questions to Kari if she doesn't see them as she's presenting. And also we'll be dividing up into breakout rooms for portions of the program today. So today's presenter, Kari Anderson, has been teaching Community Foundation workshops for several years. She's a Montana native and a former ski racer, and a 22-year veteran of the nonprofit sector, both as an executive director and a consultant. She works with regional nonprofits on board education, retreat facilitation, executive director training, staff trainings, strategy, fundraising, succession planning, you name it. We are very grateful to be able to take a deep dive with Kari into today's topic, which is one that several Jackson Hole nonprofit folks have requested in recent months. So thank you, and take it away, Kari.
Woohoo! So hello all, Happy New Year. So happy to see some faces that I know, some new logo designs that I haven't seen in a bit. That's kind of fun. And just names. It's just lovely to be able to see folks here on Zoom. And man, this is just gonna boogie, right? We got 2 hours, and about 40 minutes of that is going to be talking with each other. So I had warned some folks when they first signed on, grab some coffee if you need to. And if you needed to put on a hat or something to make yourself feel presentable to your peers, that is actually going to be happening, because the best ideas usually come from talking to each other. So here's how this is going to roll today. We can't start talking about where we're going to go unless we have some terms that are defined. And I know we are tired of pivot, and we might potentially be tired of resiliency, but I actually wanted to make sure that we talked about definitions and what I'm really meaning in terms of personal resiliency, and also what it means for you in the workplace. We're going to talk through some tools that you as a person should have, especially you as a person if you are a leader or manager, and tools that you can give to your team. The importance of how we build and actually manage resilient remote teams. I was telling Annie earlier, one of the many hats that I wear in my consulting practice, I will serve as an interim executive director, and I'm doing that for a client right now in North Idaho. And man, we've had some challenges with that. Some successes for sure, but I've been doing this for a long time. Some of you know exactly how old I am, and I've had to learn some new tricks this past year. I thought that I was a good, sometimes great leader, and I thought that I was a good, sometimes great manager, and this has been tricky. So we've had some key learnings that I'll share with you in the hopes that you can replicate, and more importantly, y'all will talk about that as a group. And now is the time, like it or not, that we actually get to start future thinking what work looks like for us. I would say for some of you, yesterday. For others, it's going to be mid-spring, and others it's going to be summer in terms of how we actually do our work. And I would be absolutely remiss if I didn't make sure we all took a pause. So many of you are coming to us from your homes over in Driggs or Victor or Teutonia. Sorry, this has been tough. And I just would be tone deaf if I just didn't recognize that we lost one of ours this past weekend. For many of you on the call, you may not know, or you may know of Jocelyn Matkins. She was the exec over at Teton Regional Land Trust, and she passed away on Friday. And this is part of the resiliency conversation, right? So I want to make sure that all of you, first of all, are okay. And if you're not, that's okay too. I know that there's a walk being organized for Jocelyn's friends and peers in Teton Valley in Pole Creek Canyon on Friday at 10. So if you're in that area and just want to walk and talk, that's an important thing for you to do. I want to make sure that you reach out to your teams, because it's not just Jocelyn, right? We've had challenges, whether it's been deaths because of illness or deaths because of non-COVID. And it's just really important to make sure that y'all are okay and that you all have resources to be able to reach out to, and both in the Valley and the county. Know that I'm thinking of all of you, know that you're loved, and that's part of today's conversation. So resilience is an interesting topic. And I think oftentimes I think of Tenacious. And no, I'm not going to break into a Tenacious D rap song right now, right? Some of my friends call me the Tenacious K, and usually it's just because I'm obnoxious. But when we talk about resilience, right, it's tough times and the ability for us to be able to recover. There's a quote or a definition from the Stockholm Resilience Center that reads as such: resilience is the capacity of a system, whether it's you as an individual, a forest, a city, or an economy, to deal with change and continuing to develop. And Annie and I were talking before all y'all got on the call, and when Shelby and Annie had reached out to a lot of us last March and April to put together some initial sessions for us as to how to deal with working from home and the pandemic and the economy and all those pieces, we literally thought, I remember verbalizing this, oh, well, we're going to be done with this in May. And so this quote from the Stockholm Resilience Center resonates with me, because we're going to have to continue to deal with change, and we're going to have to continue to develop. And this new work that we're in is going to be probably the most fluid that any of us that are in the work sector ever see, certainly in my career, right? And what is the norm 6 weeks ago is not necessarily the norm now. So resilience is about how humans and nature can actually use shocks and disturbances like a financial crisis or pandemic or climate change to do this, to spur renewal and innovative thinking, right? It is so easy, guilty as charged, right? It is so easy for us to focus on things that have just been really immense hardships since last March. So easy to do that, especially when we are losing people. And I know many of you on this call today, because I've talked with you, have said, but what if? What if we actually could use this time and really take a pause, many of you have, to look at how you have been doing business? We run so fast and furious in this sector that oftentimes we don't have the luxury of pausing to say, no, wait a minute, is this really how we should be doing this? Or do we really need that staff position? Or if we did things like this, what would a different outcome be? And so that last piece, right, of the quote, to spur renewal and innovative thinking. It's going to be one of the topics of discussion today, heads up, right? So I like to begin back when we were kiddos, and when I was thinking about what was important to share with you today, I reached out to my mom, who is a educator, not long retired, but she taught kindergarten for a long time. And I found the 7 C's from this wonderful pediatrician who's based in Boston, Dr. Kenneth Ginsburg. And I said, hey, Mom, is this something that was like in your curriculum, or is this something you did with kindergartners? Or is this how we were raised? And she said, yeah, that was actually a thing. So for kiddos to be able to have confidence, confidence, connection, character, contribution, coping, and control. And some of you may be thinking, probably rightly so, so what does this have to do with me as an adult and me creating a workforce that's resilient and how we get forward? Well, we always have to start at the beginning. And some of how we work, some of how our employees work may be absolutely caused because this was in their lives or this was not in their lives. And some of you who are having to parent in addition to manage and lead teams, we know through research that I didn't do, right? That research that's been done by a myriad of other health professionals and psychology professionals says that if we can ensure that we are also, right, in the presence of continued adult learning, focusing on competence, confidence, connection, character, contribution, coping, and control, any sort of challenge that we have actually can be overcome, right? So when Dr. Ginsburg is talking about these pieces, here's a little more detail on this. So First of all, with regard to competence, and this certainly recognizes, I mean, I'm a almost 50-year-old child, right? So I need to be recognized for things that I'm doing well and when I've done something right. That's still just as valid now. So think of your teams, right? People need to be recognized for doing something well. With regard to confidence, we need to be able to believe in our own abilities. Super important, right? For a healthy workplace. That connection conundrum that we have all faced this winter of no return, right? Like, I don't know how many months, years we've been dealing with this. The importance of connection in terms of being part of a team, whether that's your household, whether that's a Zoom happy hour, whether that's an athletic function, whether that's a book club, whether that's a cooking class, right? That the power of connection cannot be understated, certainly from kids all the way up to adults. The importance of character. You know, when we're all present in the office, I think it's a little easier to model behaviors in terms of what's right and wrong, what is culturally appropriate for your institution, what is appropriate in terms of ethical behavior. When we work remotely, if we haven't defined what that is for our group, it's easier to cut corners, right? So the importance of character and actually defining for what that looks like in your business. The importance of contribution. And specifically, Ginsburg says the ability for kids first to offer their own service, that certainly is important as an employee. And when you're a new employee, if we get comfortable offering our own service, it's easier for us to ask for help when we struggle. And if this hasn't been the year of needing to ask for help, I don't know what a year has been. The importance of coping, right? So the ability to break down tasks. Think for a second, and I'm sorry to bring back some trauma for some of you on the call. When we were first asked to work remotely last year, how many of you don't need to raise your hand right now because I think I know who you are. How many went, oh snap, we have been thinking about a remote server for years and really haven't invested in that? So how are all of our people going to get to our files, right? Or you've got this thing that it was so easy to come together as a team in person to work through. But now, because maybe cell service isn't great, if someone lives in Kelly, right, and they couldn't call in, or your internet connection was unstable, or they have 7 children in the house who are also having to learn, and a spouse, the whole feeling of overwhelm and needing to break tasks down, right? Being able to cope in terms of breaking things into bite-sized pieces. And the last piece, control. Now, those of you who know me know that I am a raging control freak is a thing. I probably need to seek therapy, right? There's all the stuff, but everyone needs to feel like they have some bit of control of something in their life, especially with work when you don't get to see your team. So baseline definitions, right, for how we move forward. Annie, I'm going to pause for a hot second because I'm not monitoring the chat. Is there anything that I need to pay attention to right now?
I just mentioned to folks that your slide deck will be shared after the workshop.
Sure will.
So don't worry about taking copious notes.
Yes,
unless you want.
Or you can, if that's how you learn, right? That's just fine. But yes, it will be shared. Thank you for that. Okay, great. So with regard to resilience in the workplace, right? So those are just some baseline pieces. For those of you who are staff, for those of you who manage, for those of you who lead. Some of you may be all that in a bag of chips. Some of you may play some of those roles, right? These are really the 5 in the workplace that we want to make sure that we are curating and cultivating. And we know that by strengthening these pillars, we in turn individually become more resilient. We know as teams, we become more resilient. And we know as an organization, we become more resilient. And if you're the leader of the pack, I'm not going to sing that song, it's very tempting. If you're the leader or you're in management, then this falls upon you to facilitate and to monitor. And that just becomes even more challenging when some of your team don't have cameras in their laptops and they can't see you when you're on Zoom, because that's been a struggle for a lot of us too. We haven't had the financial resources to make sure that all of our team has tech. So again, why are we starting today with this topic? Research says that our productivity in the last 20 years has soared. However, the increase in productivity has also increased our stress levels. And we've been sacrificing accuracy and thoughtfulness for immediacy. Anyone having issues checking email 24/7 or text, right? So we know that the productivity thing is an issue with regard to stress, and our work-life balance is shot. And it was shot for some of us. I know some of you on this call today are actually really, I would call you our Jedi masters in the Valley of being much better with the work-life balance. For a lot of us, it was a struggle. And certainly you throw March 13th onto the log pile with having to monitor lots of other things. And the stress piece was important in a lot of these habits that we've developed went away. So why is this important for you as a leader and a manager in case you've got a New Year's resolution in terms of habits and things as we work into a reopening? So why is it important for you to focus on this, and why is it important for your team? Not going to read, you all can do that, right? But we know that if we use these 5 pillars of resilience in the workplace as a way to reframe our thinking, we get to see ourselves and the world around us differently. Right? So I had mentioned earlier the importance of thinking about innovation and change. If we can have this as a grounding baseline habit, it's a lot easier for folks to embrace those pieces. Bridget knows, only because she's done far too much work with me than she probably likes to admit, that I am a bit of a freak for change. I love it. It is, I don't know, it's in my DNA somewhere, but I certainly know that I will become a little more resistant to change if I am not sleeping, eating, exercising, and connecting. And so if there are big changes that are going to be happening in your organization this spring, you as a leader being able to model resilience and helping to form resilience habits with your staff, that change path will not be so difficult for them. So this is another little interesting nugget that I discovered when I was pondering, okay, so what do we talk about as a baseline as we get into, so how is work going to look different for you, and what positive changes do we want to make? I'm very aware as a former athlete the importance of good stress, and I certainly am aware as a recovering executive director. I'll always be a recovering executive director, that there's bad stress too, right? And then someone said to me, who's a psychologist and psychiatrist, stress actually is either good or bad. It's neutral. And that was interesting. So he went on to say this. Some of you may know this, and some of you need a refresher. So ideally, right, goal of stress, it's to give our bodies strength and energy needed to protect yourself, right, at a baseline, fight or flight, right? Has some advantages, helps you meet daily challenges, challenges you to reach goals. How we perceive stress has ultimately effect on our health and overall well-being. So for some of you, stress is healthy, and for others, if it's messed with our cortisol, maybe not so much, right? But this is a really, really interesting quote from a native Cherokee tribal member. Her name is Dr. Tira Onalodog. And it's a long quote, and I'm actually going to make sure that I include it as a separate piece from the deck because it resonated with me and it may with you. And that's this: think of stress like a fire. When the fire is in the fireplace, it's beautiful and relaxing. And in the winter, it keeps one warm. But if the fire gets out of control, it can burn down the house. The fire is neither good or bad. It just exists. It's how the fire is contained or controlled that determines whether it is going to have a beneficial or harmful effect. I view stress the same way. Stress is unavoidable. It is how well we manage and respond to our stress that really determines if it's going to have an adverse or beneficial effect on our lives. So something that Annie and I were talking about when she first approached me to put this together, and also this morning, was, so what have we learned in the last 11 months, the last 17 centuries that feel like 11 months, whatever that is, that we actually want to take forward into this new year for work that actually becomes a part of how we permanently do work. And I would advocate how we look at stress, right, and how we manage stress, because working remotely isn't going to go away for a lot of us. It's just going to look different. And the importance of us being able to utilize good stressors and eliminate bad stressors for ourselves and for our team is really important. So get ready. We're getting ready for a discussion time for all of you. So if you're thinking that you didn't have to talk, guess what? We're going to be breaking into groups and you get to do this now. So there's a really interesting quote from Dr. Barbara Fredrickson. She's a professor at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. And when we're talking about stress and when we're talking about is that a negative or positive and how that impacts your day, she says, so the negatives scream at us, but the positive only whispers. And when we look at stress, right, we think so often as to the burden of stress and the stressors of pandemic, the stresses of work, the stresses of working remotely, but we don't often talk about what's actually been happening on a positive manner. So as we move into the spring, we've got to start talking about how we reframe some of the uncertainty and the stress and the challenges that certainly have impacted the arts organizations in particular, but potentially your teams. And so this is an opportunity for you to talk with some of your peers, some of whom you may have never met before, but you're going to be meeting in one hot minute or so. And I'll time it. There's not going to be a report out because we only have 2 hours, right? This is just a chance for you to be able to think about, hey, if there's something at your organization that's just kind of been eaten at the back of your head, how do we reframe that to talk about it positively? So by the wonders of Zoom, I am now going to randomly assign you to breakout rooms. And I promise I'll let you all back in about 10 minutes. So I'm gonna let Zoom take care of the wonders. And I'm not saying, oh, Bridget gets to be with Cheryl or any of that. You get to be with brand new folks. I'm gonna create 4 rooms and you are going to go. Let's see, open. You now get to practice unmuting yourselves, just in case you're wondering. Okay, and I'll bring you back in about 9 minutes. Welcome back, everyone. As you start to wander back into our main panel room, I am going to remind you a couple things. I am going to be sending the deck out afterwards, but I am also going to request that Amy actually send out the list of all of the attendees, because I am mindful that all of you may not have each other's contact information. And there may be something in one of the discussion groups that you say, man, I'd really like to talk to Stephanie Thomas more about that. Or I'd really like to talk with Cora Liguori more about that. So Annie, if you wouldn't mind making a note that I want to make sure folks have each other's contact information. That would be
great. I'd be happy to do that. Please let me know if you would not like to be on that.
There we go. That'd be even super. Okay. So, and I'm dying to know what you guys came up with, but we only have 2 hours. So, if there's things that you want to share with me, I'll share with you how to get a hold of me after the call. Cause this is what I consider professional development for myself. So I'd love to know what you all came up with. So, I want you to think for a second, whether you are the power staff of one, you truly are the nonprofit generalist, right? Or whether you happen to have 10 staff, or whether you've got a fledgling board or a new board, there is someone on your team, it may be you, don't know, that struggles with change and that struggles with having to do things differently. You're bright, they're bright, it has nothing to do with any of that. It's just how they're wired. And there's going to be additional change that happens this spring. Once people are vaccinated or not, once you choose to open or not, right, you might choose to just work remotely. I don't know, right? That's coming later on today. Some tools for you and your team to help work through the challenge of change are going to be really important for you as a leader, for you as a manager. And sometimes we are leading and managing our board through things like this. I know we have a couple board members on the call, and it's just how things work, right? In the life cycle of a business. Sometimes the exec is leading the organization, sometimes the board is, and sometimes there's a shared governance depending on where we sit in life cycle of organizations. But the mindfulness piece is important. And we're lucky enough to actually have a nonprofit in Jackson that is devoted just to this, right? How many of you have visited Sarah Flittner and Cindy Bartz recently, right? Becoming Jackson Whole. Huge resource for us. So bookmark that as something that we should check into. A couple of reminders for us as we work through this. So we need to, as teams, being mindful. Lena, I'll get to you in 2 hot seconds. Of creating time to pause, right, in our day, to really reground ourselves, especially when there is something that is challenging for us to think about, or there's something that might involve conflict. And folks, I hate to be the bearer of bad news. If you are in a leadership position at a nonprofit organization, there's conflict, right? Conflict doesn't all bad, but there's going to be conflict. And so the importance of being able to build in pause, especially when we're having to talk about how work is going to look different for us, because it will. Right? Many of you are having to make decisions right now as to permanent hybrid models, or can we do everything remotely because of cost efficiencies, or what does it look like to have folks on staggered schedules at the office? Like, there is going to be some conflict. And so we have to build in the ability to be able to pause. If we've lost our sense of humor, people, we need to go find it again. It's one of the best possible tools we have of making things better, is the ability to laugh. And it feels like that well is awfully dry for some of us. It's been really hard to laugh. It's been really hard to joke. It's not maybe felt authentic. We need to have humor, and some of that starts with you. So some of you who are wired a little more dryly, who's our class clown that we need to be bringing back into the office so that we can make sure that we have some levity in the work that we're doing. Perhaps that's a volunteer, perhaps that's a board member that can always add a little bit of humor and grace. We need to be able to build in time to comfort, listen, and express sadness. Again, right? I was telling Annie before we got on the call, I pine for 1996 because I am that old. I was in the workforce then, right? I pine for us being able to do some of the things we used to then, and it's sad not being able to. And we just have to be able to recognize that how we did things last year, there's going to be a fair amount of that doesn't come back, and we have to be able to create the space to grieve. And we also, folks, have to say thank you. Right? We have to be able to explain, to be able to express differently the gratitude we feel for all the things that we still do have. And my guess is, if you're going to make a pro and con list, there's still an awful lot of things on the pro list that we have that we can be grateful for at work, right? Perhaps in your personal life as well. We as leaders and managers need to be of the glass half full group. We have to be able to express hope as we move through change. We have to be able to demonstrate compassion in others, and we have to be able to build a supportive network that we personally can draw strength from. So for you, those of you that are EDs, and then Lena, I promise I'm going to get to your question, or have Annie tell me what it is. Those of you who know me have heard me wave this flag. You've heard this and seen me wave the flag for this before, but I'm going to do it again right now because I think it's really important. I can't imagine working in another sector. The nonprofit sector has been the best possible place for me to be, and I've been fortunate enough to be in my entire career. And it's also one of the most isolating. And that was pre-pandemic, right? It's hard sometimes to be able to find a space to be able to talk through things, because there's some things you can share with the board and some things you can't, right? Because there's a fear of overstepping or micromanaging. There's some things you can share with staff and some things you can't because of HR, right? And because we all live in small towns, then it doesn't matter whether it's Jackson or Driggs or Teutonia or Kelly or Hoback or Alpine or wherever it may be. Chelan, Washington, I think, is also on the call. People talk like they're not supposed to, but they do. And so it can be isolating. So the importance of you having a space to be able to get strength from as we move through more of these changes is really, really important. Okay, Annie, I'm going to pause and see what Lena's question is.
I think Lena might have posed that to you directly because I'm not seeing it.
Okay, let's see. Well, Lena, I'm gonna look at that as we get towards the end, because what Annie knows to be true is this: if I press too many buttons on my Zoom screen, this entire thing might blow up, and I want to be mindful of her recording this. So I promise I will get to your question as we get closer to the end of this. Promise. Okay, so a couple things on crisis and resiliency as we start to look towards how do we build our new office space. We know this because we've seen it demonstrated through wars, We've seen it certainly demonstrated through pandemic. It becomes an asset, right, that you actually cannot put a value on. And resiliency in crisis is the stuff that allows us to adapt, recover, and grow stronger because of adverse conditions. So in the workplace, right, why is this important for you as a leader and a manager? Resilient teams have greater clarity of purpose, stronger connections, and a can-do attitude instead of a Debbie Downer attitude or a David Downer attitude, depending on what we want to say. Those teams, hopefully these are your teams. They're optimistic, they're aligned to the needs of internal and external stakeholders, and they get things done. It matters, right? They get things done. The good news is you, right, as leaders and managers of your own little free worlds, can support resiliency amongst your staff members, even when they're working remotely. And I've got some strategies that are going to help with that. In case you haven't figured those all out, I know a fair amount of you, based on news articles that I have been seeing of late, you guys have already figured that out. And I don't know why you're here today. You already know this stuff, but thanks for being here anyway. So these are the things, right, that I would expect. Hey, board chairs, for those of you, right, you are the leader of the board. Just as relevant for that group of volunteers as would be for the CEO or the executive director of a nonprofit. So in particular, this connecting piece, I would say it's a tool and it's tricky. So again, I can't see you all raise your hands because my screen might blow up. If anyone's tired of Zoom, please raise their internal hand, right? It ends up, it's this wonderful tool, but it's exhausting. And so what we have learned, right, as we are finally figuring out how to use Zoom the best, is if we are really using Zoom, certainly for training, I mean, that's a thing, because there can be a recording of this and you can listen to it at 11:30 at night eating popcorn, if that's helpful. But using Zoom to nurture connectedness, truly for a social component for your remote teams. It's not so fun. In fact, it's emotionally exhausting for some of us that are more of our introverts. If you're having to be on a Zoom call all the time with your boss or your teammates, it's exhausting. And so the importance of really being strategic for you as a leader to decide what meetings are most important via Zoom and what meetings are most important via phone. And I would say the bonus round, what meetings can be eliminated? And can we just be, good connectors via email, because meetings can wear folks out. So the importance of being able to nurture the connectedness piece in terms of you as a team, that's something for you to actually talk about with your team, because each team is different. There are some of us around, right, the Zoom Brady Bunch screen today that are very linear in how we work. We are about the business of getting done, and we are about the business of the office. And either because we've been burned before or because we've had different training, we really try to separate out work from personal. Can't do that anymore. We have to, because we don't get the water cooler conversations, because we can't or have opted not to be in the office at the same point in time. We need to be the empaths. You may have to learn to be an empath. That's just not your primary touchy-feely piece, right? That's just not how you're wired. But we've got to talk with folks about what's going on that's outside of work. And I'll give you a real-time example of how I've had to learn this. So at work, I'm really good with water cooler. With clients, I think I'm pretty good with water cooler on this, but I'm serving as an interim executive right now for a client in Idaho. And we were having some staffing issues pre-pandemic, and certainly those have been exacerbated during pandemic. And it turns out that some of this has been exacerbated because of an isolation issue. And I've had to learn a whole bag of tricks as to how to communicate differently about non-work pieces to make sure that this employee is supported. And that was hard for me. But I quickly had to figure out it wasn't about me, it was about the employee, and what questions did I need to ask to make sure that they had a support system around them so they could do better work. Another strategy that I know many of you are employing right now is the power of collaboration. And yes, we have like 17 different online systems that you can collaborate with, whether it's Slack or Basecamp or Avaya, there's so many, right? G Suite, there's so many, but the importance of people feeling that they're not having to do this on their own. I had a client, share, which I'm sure is many of your examples in real time. You got kids at home, spouse or partner at home, taking care of parents. Oh, wait a minute. Now we're in isolation, right? Or having to quarantine in different floors of the house, and just feeling like you're up to here, and the importance of being able to reach out to your team or your boss to be able to say, hey, I need help, or I'm plumb out of creative juices. Can we collaborate on this? So something that's going to pop up in just a bit is the importance of continued professional development. And I would tell you the thing that I'm continuing to see last year and certainly into this year is because we are having to do things differently, there's going to be different skill sets that we have to invest in, or learning opportunities for our team, specifically learning about emotional intelligence. And if you're a leader or a manager, that's the thing. If that's not something that you've been through as a course, we're going to need to spend some money on that to make sure that we can really connect with our staff in a meaningful way, because some of your staff may not ever come back to the office. That might be a thing that we actually have to work through, or maybe it's not your current team, but it's going to be a future team. So what are we doing to make sure that we're prepared for that? And the last little piece that's so easy to do in person, but it's trickier, right, to do remotely, is what do we do to make sure that team members are valued and appreciated? And in the not so olden days when we could gather in person, this is easy to do, right? Parties in the office, birthday celebrations. Hey, you made it through your 90-day review, right? Your first 90 days as an employee, whatever it was. And I certainly have seen some creative opportunities, and certainly seen success stories of drive-by parties or socially distanced pieces. But now more than ever, because we don't get to gather, you as the ED, you as the board chair, you as a manager need to be doing different things to make sure that you retain your staff, right? Because part of this is a retention issue. All right, so we're going to break up again. This is where the rubber hits the road, because you all wouldn't be on this call if you still weren't working for your organizations and if you still weren't leading your teams. So I'd love for you to be able to share, because we have some brand new EDs on this call. What have you done this year to build a resilient remote team? And I'm going to follow up with many of you. I'm really curious because I have some clients that are pining for this information, and I can pontificate all I want, but it doesn't really matter. I'm not in the field anymore. I want to be able to hear from you. So we're going to go ahead and break this out again. Let's see here. I'm going to let you stay in the same rooms for now, partially because if I try to reassign you, I might blow this up. Okay, you got 10 minutes. Everyone's coming back here. Here's the deal. I'm not sure how many of you are actually back in your office or not. I'm going to see whether I can do Brady Bunch here for a second. No, it's not going to work. We got too many people on the call, but that's okay. So here is what experts are telling us is going to happen. This may have already happened in your world, right? Or some of you are in Bali right now and I don't know it. And that's where you've just decided to move your shop to. So for all I know, right, Amy Brennan McCarthy with Raptor Center is actually, that's just a wonderful little screensaver in the back of her office. She really is like in Nepal. It's all, I don't know. So this is where we're moving to. And again, it's going to be totally based on mission and how you and your team, hopefully you've had these discussions, can actually deliver your mission when things could close down because there's been a COVID test positive in your office, right? Have you talked about, are we working completely remotely? That's a thing for some places. Another version is hub and spoke. What we mean is this. So it's a hybrid. Some of you are in the office, some of you are not in the office. Maybe you pass like ships in the night, right? I think about the Idaho Nonprofit Center in particular. They've been working on this model for a bit. So they all work remote. They have a staggered schedule in the office of who comes in when, and then they have a very specific meeting time where they all need to be there. And like, I don't think they're wearing hazmat suits, right? But they've got the appropriate PPE. And then some of you are going to decide, hey, we are going back to what normal was. So the big question is, what are you going to do? And if you haven't discussed it, and it's okay if you haven't, because we've been putting band-aids on lots of things for the better part of 11 months. As leaders, this is what you now need to do. You actually need to have a discussion about, in order for us to do our best work, what models do we need to consider? And is there a backup plan in case there happens to be an outbreak? I am not going to be the person here that says what you should or shouldn't. Um, for many of you, you need to be with people in person to deliver on programs or services. I think about 122, right? I think about the food pantry. I think about housing needs, certainly medicine. But some of you have been able to figure out how to deliver programs and services differently and perhaps more productively. But we actually have to talk about what it is you want to move towards instead of being in a holding pattern, and what resources you need to actually do that. So there's your homework piece, right? If that's, I'm sure for some of you, I'm not going to name you, but I know how your brains work, that you've already thought this through and you have solutions. For some, because it has felt like a constant game of whack-a-mole for the last 11 months, we've just been functioning, and you're survived, right? You're here. But now it's really time to think strategically about that, what that could look like. I know, for me, and Annie and I talked about this a little bit. I've had the luxury of working remotely since I started my consulting practice. I chose to office at home. I can, that's a thing, and then I'm out working with clients when it's either cost efficient or it works out okay. But I think about Ethan and the Children's Museum. There are programs that need to be delivered there, and I don't know if they can or can't be delivered virtually, whether they're as impactful or not. It's a business decision for each of you to be able to work through, but we have to actually work through it and scenario plan so that you can start rolling that out and messaging that to both staff and the public. And these are some pieces that actually poke their head up when people are starting to think about this. So I love this quote because it actually made me rethink about, was I leading or was I managing when I was having to deal with some remote pieces. So it turns out that when we all say, hey, we want to come back to the office, for most of us, it's not about coming back to the office. It's about seeing people again. It's about having interactions with folks the way that we used to, instead of from 6 feet away, or being able to give someone a hug, or being able to share a corny joke across the cubicle, or whatever that is. It really isn't about coming back to the office. And as a leader and a manager, something that I would encourage you to think through is, whatever option you pick, right? Whether it's coming back staggered, whether it's coming back as a team, whether it's a little bit of both, having some folks, or giving some folks the ability to come back full time and others remotely, you need to be mindful because there's a power dynamic there, right? So I think about, again, pre-pandemic, in the land before time, we had the luxury in some of our positions of working remotely, and some in the office. And there was a perceived schism in terms of level of importance or level of productivity that went along with those. This may not be with any of you, but this is certainly things that I saw in corporate, and certainly things that I saw in the sector. If your quote unquote butt was in seat in the office, then you were busy. I think we all could say, well, were you being productive? And that's a different story. And if you were at home, well, then there was all the, wow, what a great gig he or she has. They get to work remotely, right? How are we sure they're doing their work? Blah, blah, blah. So something for you as a leader to think about is, when you choose to come back to work, it can't be the all or nothing. Remote work needs to be absolutely seen as just as valuable work than working in the office. And you changing paradigm and perception, it starts with you, right, in a leadership position. So board members, if you're on the call here, this is something that you need to support with your executive director. It's their job, right? It's the ED's job to decide who gets to work where and why. The board's role ends up being a much higher level in terms of there could be a COVID policy, right? And you're just making sure the ED is fulfilling the health and safety policy. But the ED gets to choose, right? Ideally, with the help of his or her team, what that model looks like in terms of delivery of mission and productivity. And the interesting piece, and I love Adam Siegel. For those of you who don't follow him, I would encourage it. He said a couple things that are really interesting with regard to managing and leading. And in his opinion, the default has been, again, pre-pandemic, that if you were in the office, you saw people and that's how you manage them. Now, I think most of you know that's not really an effective management tool, but it certainly was a Band-Aid. You can't just see and think that folks are doing their job. For us as leaders, with a hybrid model or with 100% remote or a staggered model, whatever that looks like, we actually have to learn new habits with regard to communication, how to communicate about the work that we collectively are doing, how to communicate expectations, how to communicate about work that individuals are doing, how to communicate about productivity, and how to communicate about expectations. And if we really haven't thought about that for our own shop pre-pandemic, it's even more important for us to think about it now. And an interesting piece that I will tell you I wasn't great at when I was, I would say, junior in my field. We certainly worked with job descriptions. We didn't work with performance objectives. And those are wildly different pieces of information. And performance objectives are outcome based because you can probably get to that outcome 17 different ways. So the importance of actually having performance objectives, starting with you, right, as the executive director, and performance objectives are measurable, right? They're quantifiable, not qualifiable, and it doesn't matter who your boss is, right? It can go down the list and say, hey, you achieved these things. So homework piece number 2, besides thinking about what sort of work environment you want to be able to create, are you remote? Are you hub and spoke? Are you back to the office? Do we actually have performance objectives for everyone in your organization so that you can manage to outcome, right? Not manage to busyness. And that's going to be really important in terms of employee morale and in terms of employer retention. So, we have an interesting microcosm in the greater Yellowstone ecosystem, right? In Teton County and Teton Valley in particular. No surprise to any of you, at times how difficult it is to find a full-time employee that happens to have the skill set that you need to do your job. I think we're really fortunate in this sector. We've got just an amazing treasure trove of individuals who are professional and dedicated and so passionate about specific pieces of the sector, but it's still hard. And sometimes people have to have side hustles to be able to make rent or make their mortgage because we're not still up at where we need to be for pay scale, right? But if we are really serious about taking some of the silver linings that have come out of pandemic and economy forward into your business, it's being mindful of, folks, this isn't about the butt in seat 8-hour workday anymore. If we can be very clear about what the outcomes are, whether you are the director of development, right, whether you are a program officer, whether you are a CFO, whether you're the grants administrator, whether you're the childcare provider, right? Whatever that is going to allow folks to have more flexibility in how they get that work done. And I would bet a paycheck that you would see a heightened level of productivity there. And that's a conversation to have, right? So another piece that I would ask you to consider as you are thinking about this is involving your team in these discussions. If you haven't yet, right, that involving in a piece of, as we come back together, what's I'm not going to call it the right way, the preferred way for us to do business. And in order to do business that way, what does it look like in terms of schedules? Certainly from a personal opinion, do they feel safe, right? Do they feel like that's a healthy way for us to do things? And certainly from a professional or from a productivity level. Something else to consider that I love that I've seen a couple of clients do, and certainly more corporate entities is, yes, it's important to have some meetings, and some meetings are best when they're in person because of the body language. So if you're going to have meetings, is it smarter, for example, to have them all on one day so that you have this atmosphere of collaboration and collegiality, and you've got culture that's building again. And then you all are away working rather than having to have folks come in and in and in and then out to the office. There's not a wrong or a right. What matters is that you talk about it and that you've got a little bit of flex that's built in. So in case there is an issue, you've got the ability to be able to make a change, and that you've defined what outcomes look like. So here's your next exercise. Because I tell you, this is going to be a retention tool. And I actually think it's going to be an employee recruitment tool. So how do you build a flexible work model that focuses on outcomes rather than presence as the gold standard? Right? So presence to me means butt in seat. So how do you build a model that encourages focus on outcomes? I'm going to break you into your groups again. Crucial conversations that some of you may have started in your head, right? Maybe some of you have actually started in person, about what does work like as folks get vaccinated, right? As we move into the summer season. We also have to have crucial conversations and actually put them in writing, right? About remote work policies. So some of you have employee handbooks. I'm not going to ask you to raise your hands because, again, I'd blow up the internet with that. But I'm going to guess that most of us have actually not updated the employee handbook as to what it means to work remotely. And again, we know that explicit is better than implicit. So how can we expect certain behaviors if we're actually not talking about them and formalizing them, right? And the next piece that goes along with that crucial conversation is making sure that we actually have the infrastructure that goes along with supporting our teams. So I know for some of you, because again, working remotely wasn't something that we had pondered, except for if we were sick, right? Or potentially maybe sabbatical or working working on vacation, which I'm going to address in a second, because that's actually not a thing, that we'd actually talked about technology. And when this hit for us on the March 13th, we didn't have a lot of the tech in place. So we're going to talk about systems that are either going to need to be invested in. Thankfully, there are grants out there since many of your 2021 budgets have already been finalized, but there are capacity building grants that are available to help us with tech, right? So some of you in the last discussion, I had asked you all to think about if we were thinking about what an outcomes-based model would look like instead of a presence model. So flexibility has power. And as challenging, frankly scary at times as it is to be thinking about, hey, we are not going to potentially ever be working in the same manner that we did. What does that allow you to do in terms of all other things that potentially are positive? So Mr. Siegel, right, Adam, my person that I'm a fan of, another quote that he had that really resonated with me is this: flexibility means you actually schedule your day around your life instead of around your work. That's a biggie, right? For me as a consultant, that's a biggie because I have this tendency to do the pile-on effect. I have client work, and then there's always follow-up that goes with the client work, and certainly I need to market and all the things. And so all of a sudden, my ideal life that I had envisioned when I chose to not work for others anymore, but I chose to work for myself, is not so much my ideal life anymore. And several of you have mentioned either in my ear, right, or someone else's ear, hey, can we talk about like access, and can we talk about vacation, and can we talk about responsiveness, because the burnout is high, right? So we've been given this interesting gift in terms of flexibility. And I do think it's an interesting gift. It's a silver lining that COVID has and the economy have delivered to us. And so this is why the updating of that employee handbook and the importance of crucial conversations is even more important. We have to talk about workload. We have to talk about access. We have to talk about how we communicate. So again, because I'm older, Annie and I were just talking about this on break. When we worked in the 90s, this wasn't an issue. Right? We didn't have email. We didn't text. When I left the office as an executive director at 5 or 6 at night, people didn't call me at home. Like that was verboten. You didn't call someone at home unless literally your building was burning. Like there had to be an emergency of quantum proportion. So you actually got a home on a personal life, right? You certainly were not expected to work on vacation. We didn't have email, right? So crazy bosses weren't emailing you at midnight, or crazy board members, for that matter. So as a part of how we re-envision work, and folks, I'd put this as a hot button conversation for you at your next staff meeting. We have to be able to talk about the elephant in the room, and that is, if we're allowing flexibility, we've still got to have some norms and mores with regard to access and if we're on or off. Right? So what I mean by that is this. While we may have a flexible schedule, there are still office hours, right? So let's just say Teton Valley Ski Education Foundation's office hours are 9 to 5. So that's when parents or coaches or the public could be expecting to talk to someone, right? Maybe some of those coaches are at a race and they're working on weekends, or maybe they're at night, night training or whatever that is. But we have to put a stop on people thinking that we are available 24/7. And the way that we do that is having a conversation about how quickly we respond to email and texts. Is it okay to text someone after hours? I'm not going to answer for you in terms of what is right or wrong. We've got to have a conversation about it. Folks, you've got to have a conversation about taking vacation. And that means from the top down. I don't know what your employee handbook says in terms of whether you're able to roll vacation or not. That shouldn't be a thing. You should be taking all of your vacation. You should be taking all your PTO. We need you to take a break. And even if you can't go anywhere, it means you're not working. And just because you're having a staycation doesn't mean that you're available for text or email or phone calls. It's just not okay in terms of a work-life balance. If you are a night owl, some of you on the call today are either you're now a night owl because of stress, or you've always been a night owl. People, please stop emailing your staff at midnight. Please stop emailing your board at midnight. Cedar's smiling. So there's a handy little tool, right, in Gmail that says send later, right? There's a handy little tool in Outlook where you can schedule your email. Folks, use the technology. Like if you must be up because you don't have a pad of paper next to your bedside and you got to write an idea down, if you absolutely must send an email, please schedule it. Because here's the insidious thing that ends up happening. If your staff see you working at 3 a.m., it doesn't matter what comes out of your mouth in terms of, Hannah, you don't need to work at 3 a.m. just because I'm working at 3 a.m. They think they actually have to do. Right? So that's part of our job as leaders and managers, is to manage that. And we start to manage that by having conversations about expectations. And then you all have to potentially learn some different habits in terms of, immediately responding to someone's text that comes in at 11:15 p.m. Oh, right. So the office, right? The olden days office with our cubicles and our doors and our locks and our windows used to potentially serve as a boundary for us, but we don't have any boundaries anymore. It's up to us to set them. So that's my soapbox on that. And I think we all need to become proud flag wavers of boundaries and expectations if we are expecting to address the burnout issue between all of us. And if we are expecting to retain both staff and volunteers. Annie, I see some things in the chat and I just want to make sure I pause. So in case there's something I need to talk about, I do. Maybe I'm safe.
Yeah, sorry, Kari.
Oh, no, you're good.
I was struggling to find the mute.
So many things, right?
I think after 9 months, I would know where that is. Let's see. Ann Sutton says an attorney footer on their signature caught my attention recently that says emails are answered during regular business hours, Monday through Friday, 9 to 4.
Love that. Love it. I'm a huge fan, right? Helped some clients with some time management issues with this. Folks, it's okay for you to always use your out of office assistant. And you literally can put on there, hey, I respond to emails from 8 to 9 and from noon to 1. That's okay, right? If that helps you with time management, that's great. Some of you want to be immediately responsive all the time. And you don't have to be. It takes you away from the most important things that you're working with. It usually has to do with people or your program. So it is okay to set boundaries as to when people should expect to hear back from you. I would also say the flip of this with regard to this conversation is, folks, you have got to respond to email, texts, and phone calls, right? Because the other bad behavior that I have seen during this time is if the phone call, text, or email is not of interest to staff, they're not responding. And there really is nothing that raises my hackles more, right? Than people being, it's just rude. I mean, other people are doing their job by getting a hold of you, right? Or whether it's a question from a donor, whether it's a vendor, whether it's someone trying to sell you CRM software, be a good human and return the phone, text, or email. Just do it. Annie, is there anything else that I need to answer there before we start to wrap this little thing up?
I'm not seeing anything else right
Good.
now.
All right. Okay. So this is the deal, right? Again, we had to put some hard scrabble patches on pieces in March and April. So I am hoping, I know that hope is not a strategy, but I'm hoping now because I'm behind most of your budgets, that there were some hard conversations about what it meant to have appropriate network and security for your business. Because you're going to need that, whether you're back in the office because of cyber attack, whether you're working hybrid or whether you're working full remotely. And many of you have been gracious about making sure that staff have cell phone and internet stipends during this time because they are having to work from home. So that for sure is not going away. Or what we've seen some entities do is completely pay the bill. Not a stipend, right? They just pay the bill for the employee because they're having to use their cell phone or they're having to use their own internet to be able to do business. If that's the case though, and we're accessing files, we just have to make sure that there's security and some firewalls in there. And that's the cost of doing business. I have seen a myriad of boards, well-meaning, right? Just come unglued with regard to infrastructure expenditures. And that's how we do business, right? There's a cost of doing business. We got to spend some money to make some money. And this is one of the pieces that we have to do. So if we haven't had that conversation, and don't make up a number, get bids. It's actually not as expensive as we tend to think of it as in our mind. But what is more expensive? Not investing of this and having your entire system crash, especially when we are needing to put all of our documents there or having it hacked. Another state nonprofit association who shall remain nameless at this juncture just had their entire system wiped out because there was a firewall that was breached and ransomware and all those pieces. So it's scary, right? We think about all the donor information that we're responsible for. So we want to make sure that we've got the security features in place. Anyone tired of folks sending an Excel spreadsheet or a Word document to 5 people and say, well, I need your edits. So we probably should be looking at collaboration software. And it's easy, right? With G Suite, there are a myriad of other pieces. If you're an MS Teams person or whether you work on Basecamp or Slack, there are so many other options out there that are very cost effective to eliminate redundancies, eliminate duplicative work that are going on, and really help to create efficiencies for your group. Again, not going to be the person that says what you should or shouldn't do. If you wish to talk more offline, I'm happy to serve as a resource for what I've seen work for nonprofit clients. Again, the most important thing is for you to talk about. In order for us to do our best work, What do we want to start? What do we want to stop? What do we want to continue? And the last piece with regard to how we are building our businesses differently is making sure you're looking at all of your tech platforms right now. Are they the ones you need? Do you need other pieces because you have said, hey, for health reasons, to be able to attract a different audience to see our programs, we need to invest in a different video software to be able to help people see virtually the Children's Museum or the Historical Society or the Raptors or whatever that might be. So this is the time to look at it and be really honest about what those costs are. Donors want to be part of funding solutions. Funders want to be a part of solutions. And there are places for you to go get these funds if for whatever reason they were not part of the budget discussion this year. Annie, I see something else that might have popped in chat. Do I need to talk about anything?
No, Stephanie from Search and Rescue just speaks highly of Basecamp, Asana, and Slack as collaboration software.
They're really good. They're really, really good. Even for a tech newbie, and Steph's much smarter than I am with regard to the tech. I actually can muddle around in all those and be communicative with folks. So those are great. Habits to keep that I have heard from leaders, managers, and a couple of these that I've had to employ, that as you build your teams and get ready to launch them into whatever our new reality is that you decide this spring, the importance of interaction, the importance of not information siloing, right? So keeping employees up to date. This may be all settled in your head, but if you haven't shared it, it doesn't make any sense to them. You modeling positive behavior, and that gets a little bit back to, are you working at midnight? When are you being responsive? Have you gone on vacation? Are you showing that it is okay to stop work at 3 to take your kid to hockey practice? Yes, right. All those things. So are we modeling positive behavior that if there is an issue, it could be behavior issue, it could be performance issue, that we handle it immediately, and that you are continually nurturing your team. So here's based on a client in Seattle, here's something that they are doing differently than what what they used to do. So olden days, right? All staff meeting on Mondays, which was an hour probably. One-on-one meetings with team members during the week. Now, because we have to do so much of this, they certainly have a Zoom meeting, but it really is a social piece just to check in and people share stories of what's going on in their personal lives that are mainly positive. And the staff one-on-one meetings are like a 15-minute stand-up, whether that's virtually, whether that's on the phone, because we were having to do so much of this, but they actually will do check-ins with team members on a daily basis. And it's specifically with regard to the mental health piece. They just want to make sure that people are okay. But an hour call with your boss once a day, I don't care how much your employees like you, probably not something that they want to do every day. So the importance of keeping those things short and sweet to make sure that folks are really okay and that they have the tools and information they need to be able to do their jobs each week. Okay. So again, we can think this in our head in terms of what the best thing is to do according to us. But if you're not getting feedback from your staff as to what is going to allow them to do their best work, it's probably not the right model. Right. So that's a piece for collaboration. This is the last piece for y'all to talk about today. And that is this. I'm going to give you like 7 minutes to share lessons, right? What have you learned? What one thing have you learned about either leading or managing during this time that you're going to continue? Because we actually have had lots of things that we want to be able to move forward with. So last breakout group, hang on, hold that. And I will get to whoever's question it is. All right, here you go.
She's around. Yeah.
All right, good.
She's not good at sitting still very much.
Well, neither are any of us, right? But that's okay. She's modeling a better sit stand move for us. All right, folks, as we get ready to wrap this up today, I have a couple of closing remarks other than thanking you for being great about talking with your peers 4 different times. Annie and I were just saying, man, we got to figure out the back end way for both of us to be able to join those meetings, except for then this probably would have gone for 4 hours, right? Because we're got so much to say. So as you are doing your homework, right? So the homework is this. Crucial conversations with regard to how you are envisioning doing your work. And I would call that permanently because this whole remote thing's not going away, right? So, how are we doing our best work in support of mission, but also in support of, I would say, your most important resource, and that is your team, whether that's a team that's unpaid or a team that's paid, board, volunteers, staff. Based on how you're going to do that work, what does that look like in terms of flexible work schedule, and how are we communicating expectations in terms of outcomes for work, and how we set boundaries to make sure that you're healthy, right? A really critical piece for this is the importance of empathy, right? We've mentioned the importance of humor and the importance of positivity, but the ability to at least attempt to understand what someone else might be going through. Not all of us are parents. Not all of us have kids at home. Not all of us have been ill. Not all of us have experienced loss, right? But some have. And the ability for us to be empathetic is a crucial work skill that actually needs, it's like a muscle, right? It needs to be built. So that's a big thing as we move forward. I certainly would encourage you, in addition to the virtual training, right, that we have, to consider how you use virtual meetings to build connection and belonging. And are we using another modality to work on the productivity piece, right? So what do we do? Great example for board meetings, right? Because we're on Zoom, making sure that we're building extra time on these calls for people just to catch up with each other and not talk about work. And I actually have a little fine jar that I'll put into the mix where if someone just wants to just jump right into, right, the work of Jackson Hole therapeutic writing, right, or the work of Jackson Hole ski and snowboard, no, that's a fine, right? It's a great fundraiser for nonprofits, right? If we want to just knee jerk our way into talking about work, no, we're using virtual meetings to make sure we're talking about connection and belonging. If you have not invested in emotional, training, the EQ training for you as a leader or manager, I would look into that. And maybe that's something, Annie, that we can look into for the Community Foundation as a whole. Maybe that's something that we can offer through the Community Foundation. And last, but certainly not least, for this last 11 months and certainly moving forward, what are we doing to recognize and support the need for mental health, right, for ourselves and for our team? Again, whether that is board, whether that is staff, whether that is volunteers. So now is time. I'm actually going to open it up for questions. You may unmute yourself if you wish, or you can throw anything in the chat if there are specific things that you want more information on. I would also make sure that I share that next slide, right, which, and you'll get the deck, but I am available on Mondays, always free of charge for any nonprofit entity, whether you're board or staff. I offer a little something called nonprofit therapy, and no, it is not medically credentialed, right? It just has to do with how things are running at your shop and things you may need to work through, how to ask for a raise, how to merge an organization, how to have a potentially contentious conversation with your boss, how to remove a board member, right? I mean, like all the things. And those conversations are always confidential. So, Annie, is there anything that I need to answer in chat? I'm hearing some microphones off, right? So if someone wants to blurt something out, you're welcome to. Blurt.
I am not seeing anything in chat. While that's the case, I'll just mention again, I'll be sending out Kari's slide deck and the recording of this. If you wish to revisit it or share it with a colleague, will be available within the next couple of days on the Community Foundation website. There's a link from the homepage. And I'll also send out a quick evaluation form, which we would really appreciate your feedback on.
Annie,
Please.
will you also, do you have a recording of today's session? Can we go back and revisit?
Yeah, that will be available on the Community Foundation webpage, or homepage rather.
Thank you.
In the next couple of days. I'm gonna have to do some light editing just to
because of the 10-minute, yeah.
Yep, the 10-minute breaks.
Yeah.
Yeah, I made it difficult for Annie. Yes.
No,
And-
not at all. So,
And Kari, to the end of, maintaining our mental health, I am so impressed with what Sarah Flitner is doing through
Mhm.
Becoming Jackson Hole. And then I also sat in on Silicon Coular, and I shared this in my small group, but I was so blown away that Sandy Hessler, this, titan of business development, has developed her 6 minutes daily and starts every meeting with some mindfulness. I just thought, wow, what a soft skill, but how important, obviously that's become so much more important in the last, 12 months or maybe even longer with our disconnectedness. So I just throw those both out. They're great tools. I still don't know whether Sandy's is free or whether you have to pay for it, but Sarah Flitner's is, and certainly she's dependent on philanthropy, but Becoming Jackson Hole's been doing some really great work.
I get
Absolutely. Thank you,
Sandy's
Vicki.
email daily, and so I think it is free, Becky.
Okay,
But you may
good.
have to
Thank
subscribe to it.
Thank you. I've been meaning to register to do that, and I just hadn't gotten it done yet.
Just to reiterate something Kari mentioned at the beginning of the session is my also sharing email addresses of your peer participants. Let me know if you do wish to not be on that list.
Yep.
If you got the link for this program from a friend and aren't like formally registered, you won't be receiving anything. So email me so I've got your email.
Right. Excellent. So we're at time, and one of the things that I always like to be respectful of is we have so much more we could talk about, and you guys have to do, right? Like schoolwork or running a company or a run or whatever that might end up being in your day. I would implore you all to take the evaluation survey. I mentioned that professional development is important to me, and I really do expect some candid feedback as to, was this helpful, or was there too much or too little, or is there more that you need? And certainly you are welcome not only to do the survey, which helps the foundation, and it certainly helps me, but you're also welcome to email me or get on a call and say, hey, that wasn't what I was needing, and can you give me more? And I'm absolutely happy to, because I recognize we are each on our own journey with our own business and our own staff as to where we need to go. And if I can be helpful, I'm happy to be. So thank you. And with that, I'm going to say hasta la pasta, and we will see you at the next virtual session for the Community Foundation. Have a great day.
Everybody.